Weird things you didn't know about NBA players. As fans, we always love to hear stories that seem unusual. How did our favorite players get their nicknames? It's also fun to look at stats and wonder how different players would fare in today's game with stats that they put up before the three-point shooting era. Some premier players shoot righty, but do everything else lefty. That's so unusual, but incredible. Then we've got players who have come back from frightening and potential career-ending injuries, only to play a full season without missing a game. Kawhi Leonard couldn't even do that if he were healthy. Keep watching to see all the weird things you didn't know about NBA players. Richard Hamilton. Richard Hamilton was a beloved part of the 2000 era of the Detroit Pistons. The Pistons defeated the Lakers in 5 games in 2004, and Richard Hamilton became a champion. Nobody calls him Richard. His nickname is Rip. Most people thought Rip meant rest in peace or something along those lines, but the story is completely different from that. His father gave Rip that exact nickname when he was a little boy. His father would always be there for his basketball games. He would take off to leave the warehouse where he worked, where he would load rock salt and cement onto tractor-trailer rigs. But back then, plenty of years ago in Coatesville, Pennsylvania, Richard Hamilton didn't know why his dad would push him so hard with the game of basketball. His father saw something special in his son and wanted him to stand out. "I was in the 8th, 9th grade, and my dad used to say, 'You're gonna be an NBA player,'" Hamilton said after a practice. "And everyone in my town, all my friends, used to be like, 'Man, you'll never be in the NBA. You're gonna be just like us. What makes you think you're gonna be the first?'" It was a nickname. When he was a kid, Hamilton inherited his father's nickname, Rip. Richard's grandma gave it to his dad when he was a kid, because he used to tear off his diapers as a baby. Like father, like son, the nickname was passed on to his son. His father believed every superstar needs a nickname. However, some people saw it as a joke. When Richard would go to basketball camps, the jokes would come at him fast. Why did Rip go to camp? Answer: to get ripped off. People would laugh, and I remember I used to look at my parents and wonder why they believed in me so much, said a younger Hamilton. And my dad used to be like, "I'm gonna make sure you have everything in place. If I have to spend my last dime to get you out of here for the summer, or get you a pair of basketball sneakers, I'm going to do it." And that's what he did. He saw something in me. LeBron James. Many of us have trouble using our non-dominant hand to do anything. LeBron James shoots as a righty, even when he eats and writes left-handed. Questions will always be asked if LeBron would ever be the same player if he shot lefty. James Harden has become lethal as a lefty. Nonetheless, LeBron does everything with his left hand except play basketball. During the playoffs in an Eastern Conference game against the Toronto Raptors, with another blowout in the making, James dribbled around a screen from Tristan Thompson, tried a spin move on Corey Joseph in the lane, and hit a floater with his left hand. Before the game was over, he shot a total of 3 left-handed floaters, and all of them were beautiful shots. Of course he was asked about it after the game. "I have no idea how I became a right-handed basketball player," LeBron said. "I think maybe it was because of Michael Jordan, Penny Hardaway, guys that I looked up to growing up. Seeing those guys shoot righty, I guess I'll shoot righty. I'm pretty much a left-handed guy. I don't take many of those shots, but I'm capable of making those shots. I work on my craft. I work on both hands." LeBron continued to say that he's been working on his left-handed shooting when he has time. "My Little League coach Frank Walter told me that if you can't make a left-hand layup, then you're not going to be much of anything of a basketball player," he said. "From that point on, I've worked on it every single day." LeBron could probably put up numbers shooting with his left hand. We'll never know how good he would have been shooting lefty, but he'd probably be just as good. Also, LeBron James was a fantastic student. Even with all the hype surrounding him in basketball, he took school seriously. He maintained a 3.2 GPA and didn't need any help graduating. His test scores spoke for themselves. Shaquille O'Neal. Imagine a center in today's game that can't shoot threes. The NBA wouldn't want you. How Shaq would fare in today's game is a mystery. If he would even be given a shot in the league is hard to tell. Shaq hit 1 3 in his entire 19-year NBA career. Somehow in a February game against the Milwaukee Bucks with the Orlando Magic, he banked a 3 in a blowout win. After the 1995 finals, the Magic were one of the league's top teams at the time, thanks to the Rookie of the Year and scoring leader Shaquille O'Neal. The man averaged 26.6 points, 11 rebounds, and 2.1 blocks per game in his last season in Orlando. The Bucks, meanwhile, were on a downward spiral and not playing well in their last 4 seasons. The Magic took an early lead and scored 40 points in the first quarter. Shaq had hit a buzzer-beater 3 off the glass from a full-court pass from Joe Wolf. Shaq had 19 points in the first quarter alone in that game. Vin Baker recalled how that shot changed the entire game. The Bucks would never respond and get back into it. "That was like pouring salt on an already open wound," Milwaukee center Vin Baker told the Orlando Sentinel after the game, "and we never got back into it. I thought the world was going to fall," Bucks head coach Mike Dunleavy added of the shot. "I was waiting for the roof to come down." Of course, Shaq made it clear that he knew the ball was going in. He didn't speak the words or call the bank, but he told the Associated Press that he was shooting perfect from the three-point line. "You guys are just jealous because I'm shooting 1,000 behind the three-point line," O'Neal told the Associated Press after the victory. Coach Brian Hill called the play. I got it. I shot it, and I hit it. I called glass. You just didn't hear it. Too bad we never saw another Shaq three-pointer ever again. In his career, O'Neal attempted 22 regular season three-pointers, with just one make. 20 of them came in his first 10 seasons. Lakers head coach Phil Jackson wasn't going to allow Shaq to shoot that jumper. Plus, O'Neal never attempted a three-pointer in the playoffs. However, did shoot an occasional three in the All-Star game, going 0 for 2. His former coach Hill is now a Fox Sports Florida broadcaster, and said that O'Neal was always known to put up a few shots from three at the end of practice. It's something he would do throughout his career, ironically. Dennis Scott was his best friend on the team, so they would always fool around shooting threes, Hill said. Or sometimes at the end of a shoot-around or practice, you'd have a contest just for fun making shots from half court, putting guys on teams, and competing. Still, Shaq never made those shots either. It was still a fun time for Shaq and the rest of his teammates though. I wouldn't call him a good three-point shooter, let's put it that way, Hill said. He could get the ball up there on the rim, but he wasn't going to make too many of them. Paul Pierce. Paul Pierce will be a Hall of Famer. He'll have an NBA ring and he'll become one of the most beloved Boston Celtics to ever play the game. That's saying something with that storied franchise. That all could have changed on September 25th, 2000. His life could have been over. His career would have definitely been over. On September 25th, 2000, Pierce was stabbed 11 times in the face, neck, and back, and had a bottle smashed over his head while at the Buzz Club, a nightclub in the Boston Theater District. Pierce had to undergo lung surgery to repair the damage. Witnesses said that Pierce was attempting to separate the fighters when he was stabbed. He was trying to be the peacemaker. Tony Battie, a teammate, and his brother saved him by rushing him to a nearby hospital. The story was that he got caught in the middle of the scrum and got stabbed as an innocent bystander. After all of this took place, Pierce testified that he was set up by the group of men after he was caught chatting with a few women at the club. Allegedly, one of the ladies in the conversation was related to two of the attackers, who saw Pierce getting close with their family member, and retaliated. Seriously, it's basically a miracle that Pierce survived such a brutal attack. Witnesses of the event would have never believed Pierce would play basketball at the level he did after this happened. He would soon lift the NBA trophy for the Celtics. What's crazy is that the stabbing didn't cause Pierce to miss a single game. Paul Pierce recovered from surgery and went on to become one of the greatest Boston Celtics of all time. At this point in time, he was going into his third NBA season when the incident happened. When he recovered, he played 82 games that season, while averaging 25 points, 6.4 rebounds, 3 assists, and 1.7 steals per game. There was no such thing as load management at this time. Pierce has recently talked more about this incident and what he did to prevent this from happening again. He was paranoid to say the least. Pierce said that he would hold a gun at all times for 2 years after that stabbing. In his own words, he said he was ready to kill somebody. On Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson's podcast, he continued, "It was so bad that I couldn't even, sleep," said Pierce after that brutal stabbing. "I had to have a 24-hour police surveillance in my house. That's how paranoid I was. It changes you, dude. You don't know where to go, you don't know who to look at, you on your toes. You're really on your toes, man, I'll kill somebody." The nightclub called Buzz Club is no longer in operation. Pierce was stabbed 8 times in the back and stomach over what he claimed was a conversation with a woman. William Ragland was the only person who was found guilty in 2002 of the stabbings, and was sentenced to 7 to 10 years in prison, while another person, Trevor Watson, was sentenced to 1 year for hitting Pierce during the attack. People don't know this, but I actually carried a gun for 2 years right after that, Pierce said Thursday on the podcast. I was so paranoid. I kept it in the car. I had it on me. I was so paranoid after that. I was just I couldn't be in crowds. When something like that happens to you, man, it's traumatic. I was to the point of losing it. We're all very happy that Pierce pulled through. Pierce is the NBA's 15th leading scorer of all time. He scored 26,397 points over 19 seasons with 4 teams. He's also a 10-time All-Star, and of course an NBA champion and soon-to-be Hall of Famer. Pierce is now employed by ESPN as a full-time NBA analyst. Pierce has some incredible insight on air, and can beef with just about anyone when talking about basketball. Rachel Nichols really wanted Pierce on her show after his career finished, and said she stalked Pierce until he agreed to be a full-time analyst for the show. Nichols, a longtime NBA reporter and host of The Jump on ESPN, was interviewed on Locked On Celtics podcast with John Corrales, and she talked about how she convinced Pierce to join the show. "I'm going to say it was just admiration. Some people would call it stalking. We'll find out," Nichols joked. But in the final month or two of his playing career, he was of course playing here in LA for the Clippers, which is where the show is based, and I just knew he'd be great on TV. You just know about Paul, right? He'd be great on TV, and I just really think the credibility he has with being a Finals MVP and NBA champion, and his number is up in Boston, Expletive Garden. I mean, come on. If you're looking for who you want to be a lead on your show, to me, having your number retired there, it just means a lot. Nichols wanted credibility on her show, and knew Pierce would be the perfect guy, with a storied background to bring it. Okay, Nichols didn't actually stalk Pierce. Here's what really happened as told by Nichols. Look, I'm exaggerating, but I would say at least a half dozen times over his last 2 months of playing when I was in the building anyways, I would show up and be like, "Hey Paul, ready to come work for us?" And then his final night there, it was his final night playing, he gave a sort of little locker room press conference thing, and someone said, "Paul, do you know what you're gonna do next in retirement?" And he literally said, "Well, you should ask Rachel. She seems to have an opinion." It was at that moment that Rachel knew Pierce was coming on board. He survived the stabbing and played every single game after that stabbing in that season.